Okay, this is Terry from Jensen. Good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon for most people. Not everybody, but a lot of us. And I want to thank you again for your time to join me and learn more about MiYO. And I've tried to make these concise so I don't waste your time. And today's topic will be applying MiYO structure quickly and easily. And this is for the aesthetic kit or the tooth kit. So I'll be showing an anterior because that's basically what a lot of us will be using the MiYO structure for the teeth is for the anterior cases. So we can get surface texture and also diffuse color, especially like we see in aged teeth. So let's get started. And I got a video put together for you. So I hope you'll like it. Okay, so applying MiYO, some tips and tricks, and the applying the structure. We have the window and the enamel. That's what comes with the current kits we have out there. And that's what you're going to be using for about 99%. So a simple tip is the structure enamel is mainly for the low chroma, higher value shades, like the lighter shades, and of course uh, the enamel is or the window is for the older shades. So here we're going to be doing some mixing. We're going to use a non-metallic spatula to mix because as much as you mix, it would grind in there and make it gray over a period of time. Use a patting motion. It's called shear thinning. And what you're going to do is pat it. It's thixotropic. So if you keep mashing it together, it'll be like squeezing a damp sponge. It should be homogeneous and it should have kind of a wet, shiny surface. So you can see the sheen there in the video. And again, plastic, glass, agate, anything. And if you start it like we do the MiYO colors, you'd incorporate air bubbles, and you don't want air bubbles. And it should be able to be cut and then patted back into a nice homogeneous mix again. But in real life is different from what we see in the movies. And in real life, if it's been open for a while, you might get a little bit of a crunchy appearance. So this mix exhibits a dryness that will make it difficult to work with. Plus, it's thin with the in-sync paste glaze liquid, which I'll call ISPGL further on. So I'm going to put a little bit of glaze liquid on this is a GC spatula, it's a composite spatula. And I'm going to pat it in there. Now, normally it's easier just to put a drop in the bottle and close the lid and come back in 5 or 10 minutes, and then it'll incorporate, it'll soak in there. But, you can mash it in too. It's up to you. Of course, I'm with a video here, so I'm trying to make it a little quicker. And when you see a white dryness here, that's a good indicator that the material is just a little bit on the dry side. Think of it like cookie dough that doesn't have enough butter in it. It's just a little crunchy. And what you're looking for is to be able to spread this kind of like a thick peanut butter spread, honestly. So you see I'm trying to do this, and it's kind of chunking up here, so it's a little cakey. And, in the overall scheme of things, this is a blip on the radar because all I do is put a little bit of the in-sync paste glaze liquid down there and I incorporate it with my spatula. Again, in real life, I would do this a little bit earlier in the day and I'd say, okay, and I'd put a drop or two in the jar depending upon how much was in there and let it sit. But you see how it's manipulating better. It's starting to, smooth. It's getting kind of a spreadable consistency to it. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for to be able to get it to spread. Think of it like Play-Doh. You're trying to get Play-Doh or light cure composite. You want to get it to where you can make a crepe out of it. Not really a pancake because you want it much thinner. And ideally, thickness is going to be around a 0.5 millimeter. This allows for ease of application. You can see dirt specks and air bubbles. And you should be able to see through. It should be lightly translucent. Now, I'm making some here straight out of the jar, and we're going to make this intentionally too wet. And I do this just to show you what you can get away with and what's possible. I mean, I've been using this stuff for 3 years, so I want you to be very, very comfortable with this material. Okay, so I just cut out a bunch of me mixing it up, and now I've got it actually, this is kind of like creamy. And it'll stick to the spatula instruments, you know, and it kind of pulls. So if you pull your spatula away, you'll see it pull with it, and it sticks to your spatula. You see the sticky residue there I'm showing with my zirconia spatula. And while it looks neat, this is kind of like what you want the colors to be, but this is not what you want the structure to be. We want to make sure that it's a more pasty and just blot it. I mean, it's kind of like porcelain mixed with a glaze liquid. So you can blot it. It's going to take a little bit longer to blot. Usually when I blot this material, if it's a little on the soupy side, I'll give it about a 10-second, 12-second blot. Because it just, you know, the liquid it's a glycerin type, glaze type liquid. So it's very sluggish to blot out. It's not like distilled water. Okay, so now I can take my spatula and I can smear it out. Now I can get my crepe type consistency. And all this is a glass circle that I put some pale construction paper under so you can see the contrast. Because if it's a black background, it's hard to see. So the original's on the bottom. That's what I had in the jar. And the overwet mix that was blotted as the top. It's the same material. It's the enamel structure. So when you get it thin enough, you'll be able to start to slightly see the color through it, you know, and you can see it right there where it's getting kind of a blue show through, kind of a lower value. And you definitely want to inspect for air bubbles and dirt specks and lint. That little lint stuff we see in porcelain, it looks like little squiggles of fiber that are about 2 or 3 millimeters long. And it's real hard to pick up big pieces with your brush, but if you take the little pieces like I'm cutting off here, and I put the little chunks out there, if you're wondering why I'm cutting up little chunks, it's because these are the easy parts to pick up with a brush. Particularly like if you have the MiYO brush kit, the MiYO number 3 brush will pick these up really, really easily. Now the MiYO 3 brush is a little bit bigger than the MiYO 2, but the main thing is the MiYO 3 brush has a little synthetic in the middle with sable on the outside of the brush. It's about the size of a 0 brush, if you're familiar with brush sizes like an art store. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these kind of like brownies, kind of like little bricks or tiles. And you want to cut all the way down to the glass. And if you're using a tile or something, I mean, it's going to make it easier if you're on a flat surface. So, I mean, a lot of times I'll go down to Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards and pick up a tile. I can work off that. But I've had these glass slabs since I got in the business about 45, 46 years ago. Out of about 55, I got about 15 left. Okay, so you see me cutting it kind of like bricks. And these are just small, manageable pieces I can work with. And you want to cut all the way down the glass. You're going to find these flattened brushes, kind of like we had for paste opaque brushes. They're going to help you smooth this down. It's not in our kit, but a lot of people have them around from paste opaques. This is the number 3 MiYO brush. It's a little stiffer than number 2 and ever so slightly bigger, but it comes to a nice point. Okay, so now I'm left-handed. And I'm showing you distilled water here because you can use distilled water with structure to smooth it and shape it. It's kind of like porcelain. Actually, it is ceramic. Okay, so we know what it is. So distilled water will help it smooth it easier. But when I'm mixing it in the jar, I want to use the Insink paste glaze liquid. Okay, so there we have an anterior restoration. I've already fired the MiYO colors on it. So here I'm using a zirconia blade, kind of like a Belle de St. Clair tool, but I made out of zirconia. This is a Tanaka spatula, a metal spatula. We have the Belle de St. Clair porcelain spatula. You can use a waxing instrument if you want to, but I like the zirconia mainly because as many demonstrations as I do, there's not going to be any metal getting in. So you're going to push it down all the way to the glass. Now I'm left-handed, so I'm going to swipe from left to right, but if you're a right-hander, you're going to swipe right to left. Just push it down to the glass and swipe smartly in your direction, whether you're right or left-handed, in one quick, easy motion. Not super quick, but quick enough. Okay, looks like we have a frozen video. Okay. Well, you'll know about swiping in a smart motion. There we go. So we jumped ahead. So when you push down and then you swipe, it'll pick up a piece just like you see, kind of like a flag right there. And all I do is touch it to the surface. Now this is just a clean surface. I don't have any glaze liquid or anything else on there. And there you can see it close up. I'm getting ready to have it so you can see it better. I know the guy that made this video, so we should be good. So I didn't do a really good job because I'm pretty good at this, but I want you to see how easy it is, and you can mess it up. So all we're going to use is that flat brush. Now what I do is I dip it in water and I wipe out about 60% of the water. So I have a little bit of water in there, and this keeps it from wanting to stick from that structure. So you want about 30 to 40% water content. And you want to get rid of any voids. So you can use that flat brush and mash the boundaries together. You can use your MiYO brush or whatever brush you have there and kind of smooth it down. So I'm using the MiYO brush because, well, we make the MiYO brush. And there's my flat brush I like to use because it's easy to go parallel to the surface and get a nice even coat. And you want to address areas that are too thin or too thick. And see, I have a thin spot on purpose there on the cervical just to show you. It's kind of like if you're mounting a model on an articulator, you know, where you just add more plaster to plaster. Or if you're used to building with porcelain, it's just like adding porcelain. So I'm going to add a little bit of wet material in there. And then I'm going to kind of pat it in place. And this is why we want to have our brush just a little bit on the damp side, because it'll make it easier for you. If you've been doing porcelain for years, this is a no-brainer. If you haven't been doing porcelain for years, if you worked with plaster or you worked with anything wet, or even the learning curve on this is not hard. Now, if it gets too wet and it starts getting soupy, I just take a piece of tissue and I blot when it gets too loose or starts to sag a lot. It's hard to play. It doesn't play well with others. You know what I mean? So I work with it. So when you blot it, it'll get that kind of flannel type look to it. And if you want to cut it back, just like with a cookie cutter that would, you know, cut through dough, I find it much easier to use an instrument just to pinch off the periphery where it's too large. It's excessive beyond the boundaries of what I want to see. And I also want to fill in and go over slightly the incisal edge, because if you're right at the incisal edge or something like that, where you're just even with it, if you don't get it just right, it'll want to pull. But if you slightly exceed it, just even a little bit, or just go over the facial edge of it and feather it back over the incisal edge, it'll stop it from wanting to lift or pull. And your moisture control can be enhanced by tapping or serration, just like porcelain. If you want to smooth something down, you tap it or serrate it. There's my Tanaka. It has a spatula and it has a little composite type pad on the other ends for vibrating. And there's that flannel type look I was telling you about. So it handles a lot like porcelain, a very lot like porcelain. I do my primary shaping. You know, they say you can do it with brushes, but if you want to be quick about it, I find an instrument for putting in the primary application of anatomy is much faster than I can finesse it in with a brush finally. If you start off with a brush, it just takes a long time. So all this is an endo file in an instrument, and I polish off these spirals off about the last 2 or 3 millimeters. Vacalon sells this one. I think it's around $22, $23. It's a really nice little instrument. There's my MiYO number 3 brush. And what I'm going to do is finesse the labial anatomy that I've started to put in here. Now again, I'm going to have my brush. It's going to have about 20 to 30% liquid in it, because I already have some liquid here. The wetter your structure, the drier you want to be with the brush. Also, this number 5 MiYO brush, the fan brush for paracromata, it picks up dust and lint like you wouldn't believe. So I used to wipe it with my fingers and it doesn't do a good job. Wipe it on a microfiber towel. It does a great job of getting rid of any dust or lint in it. Okay, so then I can tap it, and when I'm tapping, bring a little moisture up so it's easier to manipulate the surface. And with about a 30 to 45 degree angle, with light pressure, I drag it from one side to the other. And you'll see the fuzz at the end. See the fuzz where I've displaced the surface? And I actually have nice parakamata type grooves on the surface, and they're all even. It's very easy, one-shot deal. Okay, if you want to have the parakamata that are in there, it's important not to overfire your furnace. It's like having beautiful anatomy in a waxed up gold crown wax up, and then getting your wax up too hot and all the details lost. So you don't want to melt this out, because structure is a very low fusing material. We're coming out with a higher fusing structure that can be used in cases where cases are going to doctors, and you want to make sure they don't have the uh, chance of melting out something too easily. So we'll have a low fusing structure and a high fusing structure. But today's presentation is about the current low fusing structure. So here I'm taking my number 3 MiYO brush. Again, just the slightest bit damp. And just re-putting in some more parakamata because it came out. You can see the striations there now. And sometimes if it's a little bit less wet, it's easier to see. Sometimes the shine will throw it off, but it just depends on what works for you. Remember, this is not the only technique. This is a technique that I use that works fast for me. Now, one thing, whether any finish lines you have, whether it's incisal, proximal, or cervical, you want to smooth in the finish line, because if you have rough edges that are kind of bulbous or sticking out there, that's where they kind of want to peel as the material's drying out and baking. So even on the lingual, I feather everything in. But if you have a lot of excess, it's faster to take that instrument, whether it's like my zirconia tool, or whether it's a spatula edge or a waxing instrument, and pinch off the stuff, and then to smooth it in with a brush as a final step. Now I take that endo file that I had, and I check for thickness. And like I said, I take a small rubber point and I polish off the striations for the last 2 or 3 millimeters, and I can check for depth. Okay, you can see a little dot right there. That is where I have the depth check. You want to make sure that you kind of take your brush and mash that close, unless you like to have that little hole bake in your crown, which I think people would be less than pleased if they got that later. So there it is on a peg, final inspection. Okay, I sharpened out my mesial incisal edge there, and I have my parakamata and everything to go. And so I'm ready to stick it in the furnace. So let's talk about some of the things we talked about. Have your oven cycle tested for structure. You want to make sure that you're not overfiring this and melting out all your detail. So what I normally do is just check this before I start. Ensure the entire labial is covered with structure, because you'll see your bare framework sticking through. Smooth all your finish lines before firing. Check for depth of application and fix your holes. And last but not least, double check for dirt, lint, bubbles, and voids. Look, you're going to find that dirt and everything else doesn't burn out. So if it's a very translucent material, you want to make sure that you get all the dirt and lint out. Okay, if you see that thin spot there towards the distal cervical, that's going to show up like a hot spot. So you just get a little material. Of course, I think I clipped this video a little quickly right there, but I fill it in, and then you want to blot it. If the deeper the hole you have, the more you want to incrementally fill it up and blot it, just like composite. Because if you put a lot in a very deep hole, it may not incorporate around the periphery of that divot, and it'll show up. So I like to fill it and blot and tap it, and then fill it and tap it. Okay, I'm going to destroy half this to show you how thick my application is. You really don't want much more than 3/10 in an application. And it's going to be hard in the beginning for those of you learning to use structure, at least if you're like me, because I'm an old time technician. We got to make it thicker. But take a look at this from a profile view. It's roughly the thickness of a business card. And it too much will take away from the optimal aesthetic. Remember, ideal thickness is less than 3/10 of a millimeter. Think of a business card. It can be about 1.5 business cards thick, not much more than that. If you get it more than that, it's going to look a little funky. So here's one before where I've applied it and fired and smoothed. There it is. There's another one as it's applied, and there it is, fired. So I hope this helps some. If you have any problems, call Jensen, 800-528-5531 for technical. My name's Terry. If you call up, my extension is 2256, or if you need to email me, it's tmq@jensendental.com. We're here to help you. I want you to have great results. This material is amazingly aesthetic. Stay tuned for more when we have in the future. If you have questions, again, call 800-528-5531 for further assistance. And make sure to follow Jensen Dental on Facebook and Instagram so you can be updated every time we go live. You can also visit jensendental.com/MiYO to learn more about MiYO. Thanks for watching today, and please click the follow button to get notification of future MiYO education tips and tricks. And like our Jensen page, please. Be safe, be careful. We're looking for that magic bullet to get rid of the coronavirus, and I want to see you guys out there making money and being happy with your families. This has been Terry for Jensen. Thank you very much for your time.